ridge of silver on her skin, tracking through the pine and stone, the scent of fang and sin. Thin shadow claw through forest shade, Lucinda through the night, a wolf of storm, a vampire pale, both vanishing from sight. For months she chased through freezing rains, through valleys cold and wide, past shattered shrines and ancient oaks, where darker things may hide. Her bow was steady, sharp her aim, her oath had never bent. For every creature marked by night was one the moon god sent. But the arrow would not fly, no matter how she drew the sky. Gold awoke along the grain, like sunlight singing through her veins. Not prey, not doom, not fate to sever, but two lost halves she'd sought forever. She found them both at bay. Finn stood fierce with bared white teeth, Lucinda cold as grey. The wind was thin, the silence deep, the stars burned hard and far, and all the world seemed held beneath the gaze of one bright star. She raised the bow, she drew the string, she fixed her hunter's eye. But then the shaft grew warm with light and would not choose to fly. A golden trembling filled the wood, it hummed within her chest, held the bow, it finally found its rest. And the arrow would not fly, no matter how she called the sky. Gold awoke along the grain, like sunlight singing through her veins. Not prey, not doom, not fate to sever, but two lost halves she'd sought forever. Still her heartbeat changed, the huntress understood. No curse now stood before her there, but something old and good. No beast to kill, no fiend to end, no victory to claim, but fragments of a hidden bond that answered to her name. Finn lowered slow his guarded claws, Lucinda watched in flame, and neither moved to strike or run when Artemis now came. For in her eyes the hunter's frost gave way to stranger fire, the kind that turns a road of ash to longing and desire. The chase was done, the old law broke upon that mountain air, and something larger took its place than vengeance, fear or snare. The wolf, the queen of midnight blood, the goddess of the chase, now stood upon the threshold of a path none could replace. No arrow flew, no blood was spilled, no triumph song was won, yet deeper than 1,000 hunts a different tale begun. For sometimes in the dark of night the heart at last can see that what was named a destiny was only mystery. And the arrow would not fly, it only turned her toward the sky. Gold awoke along the grain and lit the old world once again. Not prey, not doom, not fate to sever, but two lost halves, and now forever.
forged in Middlewich, where hammer songs were known. A smith whose hand shaped iron true, though grief had shaped the bone. His wife was taken years before by necromancer's art, and ever since the word itself was fire inside his heart.
So when he saw two shadowed men beyond the market wall, and one raised pale and careful hands where evening light grew small, he thought he watched some cursed rite, some wicked grave-bound scheme, not knowing bloom and tenderness can haunt a bitter dream. He came with steel and old belief, with buried rage and sharpened grief, but truth stood quiet, thin and strange, and one small moment changed everything.
Young Eliona stood aside where little flowers grew, the kind he loved since boyhood days, where river grasses blew. And Necronus with patient hands drew life from root and stem, not calling dead from out the earth, but coaxing spring for him.
Yet Varric saw no gentle art, no kindness in the sea. He charged with all the years of lust that hardened in between. His blade flashed out, his fury burned, his voice became a cry, and all the peace of that small field was broken by his stride.
He drove them back through stone and thorn until they could not flee, and there the elder placed himself where every blow would be. Before the younger necromancer, straight and unafraid, he faced the smith and offered up the price his own life made.
Take mine, he said, if one must fall, let Elionas go. No curse was cast, no darkness rose, no hidden dagger showed. The blacksmith stared as if the world had shifted from its frame, for nothing in that quiet voice it sounded born of shame.
Then from his hand the sword slipped down and struck the earth below, as all the tales he'd forged in hate dissolved in one soft blow. Not every keeper of the dead was cruel or hollow-eyed, and not all dark-rubbed souls were beasts with murder tucked inside.
Among the flowers no ritual burned, no malice filled the air, only one man shielding one he loved with simple stubborn care. And Varric stood with empty hands where rage had lived before, a man who saw the world break open like an unbarred door. He came with steel and old belief, with buried rage and sharpened grief, but truth stood quiet, clear and plain, and left him less of hate and more of pain. Above the village burned, a thick and iron red. The broken roofs were falling in, the living mourned the dead. Through ash and smoke came Ares with thunder in his stride, and every stone beneath his feet shook hard and split aside. Before the smoking temple doors one final figure stayed, with soot upon her battered skin and firelight on her face. The people fled, the world gave way, the streets were choked with flame, yet Nova stood and faced the god and did not bow his name. She loosed one arrow through the fire and struck the god of wrath and ire. A single breath, a single threat, she was the woman who made Ares bleed. He raised his sword to end her there, to crush that final spark, but from her bow the arrow sang and cut the raging dark. It found the weakness in his guard, with cold and perfect art, not born of fear or desperate hope, but from a master's heart. He staggered back the smallest space a step no god should yield, a little law of mortal hands that split a mythic shield. His fury rose, but with it came a fierce falling wall, she cast her bow aside and drew her sword to meet his own, where ruin opened wide. Their blades did not ring out like steel, but roared like storm and stone, and all the shattered temple glass was blown from frame and throne. He drove her down with deathless strength enough to break the land, but Nova turned beneath the weight with fierce and knowing hand. Her bright edge flashed across his arm, so slight and sharp and clean, and golden ichor touched the dust where mortal feet had been. Then silence stood between the flames, while all the houses burned, and something in the gaze they shared abruptly bent and turned. He did not look upon the wound, but deep into her eyes, as if the clash of steel had spoken truths no tongue could prise. She did not lower sword or will, though something in her changed. A single breath, a loosened hand, a battlefield rearranged. Between the god of war and her no simple hatred stayed, but fate drawn tight is tempered while the bond their violence made. She stood unbroken in the heat and made a deathless heartbeat skip. No prayer, no crown, no shield, no creed. She was the woman who made Ares bleed. Roofs with silver at his side, a hunter sworn to track the fiend no shadow yet could hide. But Brent was always half a step, then 3, then 10 ahead, and left behind small wicked gifts where fear and mockery spread. A black rose on a windowsill, fine chocolate tied with thread, a little book with laughing script that turned the hunter red. Vampire hunter for dummies, written neat and smug and clean, and every taunting token felt too clever to be mean. He chased the dark just grinned, and left sweet trouble on the wind. Arose a laugh, a fleeting glance, what started war began to dance. At last I found what looked like tracks where Brent had surely gone, through narrow lanes and cellar stairs far past the edge of dawn. But waiting there were starving mouths and eyes like coals half dead, a nest of hungry vampires smiling wide at what they'd fed. He fought with stake and silver blade, but numbers bent the night, and just when death leaned close enough to steal away the fight, Brent broke through like a storm in black and tore the pack aside, though claw and fang and jagged steel bit deep into his side. He came through blood, he came through pain, and stood between the fangs again. A rose once left in jest or pride, now bloomed in red at Brent's torn side. Zack brought him where the fire stayed low, and laid him down with care, then hunted through the freezing fields for any blood to spare. He brought the stag, he brought the hare, he tried the old way first, but Brent grew pale with every hour, and weaker with his thirst. The jokes were gone, the grin was dim, the clever eyes half closed, and every breath that Brent still drew felt borrowed and deposed. Then Zack, who'd long denied the truth that hunted in his chest, sat close beside the dying man and chose the final test. Across his hand and let the red line run. No order now, no hunter's law, no distance left between. And Brent, with trembling fading strength, drank slow and looked above, as if he tasted not just life but something more like love. The color stirred back through his lips, the dark returned to stay, but softer now, less shaped by night, less sharpened for the fray. And Zack did not pull back his hand when Brent still held it near, for some hearts find their truest path, through danger, blood and fear. He chased the dark drew near, till love outlived both law and fear. No rose was sweet as what he gave, warm living blood and Brent was saved. Shattered stone and silvered every seam, as Apollo crossed the temple court as lightly as a dream. His cloak shone warm like flowing gold, yet made no sound at all. A quiet sun in ruined night beneath the columns tall. There by the old forgotten well sat Aurelia alone, with midnight feathers brushed in bronze and moss beneath the stone. And near her rested Talira, with amber in her gaze, no longer bound by darker hands, but marked by stranger ways. No hunt, no chain, no whispered command, only moonlight, only hand in hand. The god, the winged, the serpent's soul. Three broken parts made one thing whole. No word was spoke as Phoebus came. Between the two it rested and laid one hand on feathered cheek, one hand where Lamia pressed her stillness through the midnight air. Cool, scaled and sharp and bright, while all the chill that held the ruins softened in his light. Aurelia bowed her noble head, her dark wings open wide and wrapped them round fair Talira's form like shelter at her side. The Lamia closed her glowing eyes and placed her hand too near the harpy's arm, and felt within no danger and no fear. No hunt, no chain, no whispered command, only moonlight, only hand in hand. The god, the winged, the serpent's soul. Three quiet hearts made one thing whole. She felt the wild within the wings, the pulse of wind and sky, but woven now with golden warmth. No night could nullify an Apollo bright, immortal flame. Did not command or claim, he simply stood and shared his light, and blessed them without name. The ruined court, the broken well, the ivy-choked old prayer, all seemed to hold their weathered breath to guard the silence there. For louder than a temple hymn or any vow unsworn was this still shape beneath the moon, where something new was born. No puppet strings were left to pull, no hunter's horn was near, no shadow of the maker's hand, no old remaining fear. Beneath the pale and patient moon the world at last grew still, and even stone and sleeping roots seemed bowed to gentler will. The divine, the winged, the deathless one were joined in single frame, not bound by fate or forged by war or marked by grief or blame. Just one soft shape in silver night, where ruined columns stood, and all the silence round them spoke of love more deep than blood. No hunt, no chain, no whispered command, only moonlight, only hand in hand. The god, the winged, the serpent's soul. One made whole. candle slept, the furnace breathed, the gold-veined chamber shone, and bronze bright strength moved through the heat, as if the flame were whole. Then all at once the fire changed, rose fuller in the hall, a living pulse, a vibrant bloom that answered some deep call. From molten gold and coal red light to burning figures came. Wolfy broad as bursting stone, as Shira fine as flame. No fear in fire, no wound in heat, only the blaze where strong hearts meet. In flame and ember, spark and breath, they held him close and quieted death. Their eyes were white as furnace stars, their forms all cold and blaze. Yet when they saw the forge-born god, their wildness turned to grace. No word was said, no oath was sworn, no cry disturbed the air. They moved like hearth fire, learning love, like warmth made visible there. Great Wolfy reached him first of all and drew him to his chest. His mighty arms of shimmering heat became a place of rest. Then Ashura came from the other side, with violet red soft light. Her burning hair brushed by his face like smoke in fading night. No fear in fire, no wound in heat, only the place where strong hearts meet. In flame and ember, spark and breath, they held him close and quieted death. Hephaestus closed his heavy eyes and held them both the same. No pain was left in any spark that danced across his frame. The soot, the gold, the living coals, the deep infernal glow, all seemed to bend around the three and soften as below. The endless forge, once loud with toil, grew almost still and mild, as if the heart of fire itself had gentled like a child. And on his skin their sparks not bright, like little newborn stars, not one a mark of injury, not one a trace of scar. So in the hidden world below, where molten rivers shine, the god of forge and flame was held by fire, made half divine. Not all that burns is made to break, not every heat must scar. For sometimes love arrives as flame, and safety wears a star. And in that all-consuming warmth no loneliness remained, only the peace of being known and held and unashamed. While deep below the mortal world the red gold chambers hummed, three souls stood in the furnace light, as if they'd all come home. No fear in fire, no wound in heat, only the place where strong hearts meet. In flame and ember, spark and breath, they held him close and silenced death. Held the house where candle shadows swayed. Two mighty warlocks bound by love, unbroken, unafraid. Then Milo came, their infant son, with starlight in his cry, a little spark with sleeping power, and quiet watchful eyes. But on a night of iron wind came Malachor and kin, with hollow vows and hungry hands and ancient spite within. They came out as mere killers come, but worse by far than blade, to rip the living core away from what the child was made. The house was torn by grief and flame, by blood, dark hands that spoke his name. But love, when all the world is dire, can send a child beyond the fire.
Caleb stood like fallen wrath and carved the doorway red. He roared for Raven, run with him while foes around him bled. She fled upstairs with Milo pressed against her shaking heart, while below the storm of claw and spell tore all their home apart.
Then in the dark she felt it snap, that bond no death should sever, the living thread that tied her soul to Caleb's own forever. She knew he'd fallen where he stood, but not before his hand that sent on scores of necromancers broke into the land.
Malachor climbed the final stairs, his claw alight with doom, and Raven stood before the crib as death filled all the room. No shield remained, no time to flee, no ally left to call. So with the last strength in her veins, she gave her child her all.
She shaped a final desperate spell from blood and breath and years, and sent him from the lightning's reach through all her pain and tears. The red flash struck the chamber, broke her body, took the flame, but Milo vanished from her arms before the killing came. The house was torn by grief and flame, by blood, dark hands that spoke his name. But love, when all the world is dire, can send a child beyond the fire. He landed in a moonless wood beneath the branches dark, a tiny child with no one left, alone inside the dark. Then hungry bears came closing in through root and leaf and briar, until there rose between them all a wall of purple fire.
And from the shadows silent came three figures cloaked and grim,
Darian, Jareth, Noctarian, the kind who'd hunted him. Necromancers all by blood and name, the ancient war made plain. Yet something in them broke that law and would not kill for gain.
They took the child in careful arms and bore him far from night. They hid him well, they raised him warm, they kept him out of sight.
They taught him how to walk through grief, how not to fear the dead. They soothed his cries, they stayed through storms, they watched beside his bed.
They laughed with him, they told him plain, not all dark arts were cruel, that hatred passed through age to age can make the wise a fool. And when they found the ruined home, they did not leave it bare. They laid his parents into earth with reverence and prayer. So now, beside a gravestone worn, a young man kneels in misty morn, and three dark shapes stand watch above, not bound by fear, but forged by love. Beyond old wars, beyond old pyres, a life was saved by purple fire. Yet Jarrick's shadow cross felt none of it, where grief had drowned his sleep. Before him stood his oldest foes in pale and fading flame, Kalanor crowned in silver white, and
Vornic's darkest grave. The hunter, feared by mage and shade, by warlock, witch and seer, dropped heavy to his blood-wet knees and laid aside his fear. His armored hands dug through the mud, his head bent down in shame, and for the first time in his life he did not curse their names. The hunter knelt where enemies stood and begged for love against the flood. No steel was raised, no hatred spoke, only a heart already broke. He told them of his twin Jean, the half he'd left behind, when bitter words had split them wide and hardened Jarrick's mind. For Jean had given heart and soul to two who wielded flame, and Jarrick turned his back in wrath and would not hear their names. But now he'd come too late for peace, too late for softer years, and found his brother fading fast despite all love and tears. Not Valak's art nor Gareth's hands could draw him from the night, so Jarrick came to those he'd hunted and begged them now for life. One solemn glance, the kind that passes soul to soul when fate denies all chance. They followed through the storm and ash where Jean lay pale and still, while Valak watched with hollow eyes and Gareth fought his will. Then over that cold dying form the ancient working grew, white light around Calinor's hands, black depths round Vornic's too, and Jarrick did not draw away but held Jean's frozen hand, as if sheer grief and brother's love alone might make him stand. The hunter knelt where enemies stood and begged for love against the flood. No steel was raised, no hatred spoke, only a vow the storm. Healing light and dark reached down with careful grace and laid their free hands over his where sorrow marked its place. Then all the world fell sudden still, no thunder, breath or cry, as something old and buried deep woke burning in reply. No clash of curse and hunter's will, no tearing force apart, but something far more terrible, a turning in the heart. The silver blaze, the endless dark through touch at last could see, not their destroyer kneeling there, but what was meant to be. Jarrick felt it like a silent bell strike through his blood and bone, a truth more sharp than any blade, more final than a throne. The warlock and the necromancer were no longer prey to track, but the missing shape his soul had sought and never could call back. So by the hand of dying kin and in the ritual's breath, the hunter learned his fate was bound to those he named as death, and nothing in the world remained as simple as before, for love had crossed the oldest line and broken it at core. The hunter knelt where enemies stood and found no evil, only blood. No fate was asked, no oath was sworn, yet from that touch a bond was born, a light and shadow, fear depart. Both had found their missing heart. where silent rivers wind, the Lord of Ash and Ember walked with old and patient mind. Cerberus raised all three heads and growled toward the foam, for something vast had crossed the dark that borders Hades' home. He came where black waves tore the stone and salt flew through the air. A kraken coiled its endless arms around a stranger there. The battle rang through hollow cliffs, through caverns deep and wide, and Hades called on all his strength to break the monster's tide. Oh, sing of the Lord of the underworld flame, who stood in the storm when death near came. And sing of the boy from the merciless sea, who woke with no past, no name, no memory, in the land where the lost and the fallen roam. Two hearts found light in the shadowed dome. Withdrew into the iron deep, the god remained beside the man and watched his quiet sleep. He woke in fear at crimson eyes and at the crown of night, but Hades spoke so calm and low, and fear gave way to light. What shall I call you, wandering soul? The stranger closed his eyes, but every road behind his brow was wrapped in empty skies. No name remained, no distant fire, no face, no vanished shore, and even those who searched his mind could find his past no more. So healers came with careful hands, with charms of bone and gold, and demons skilled in memories sought stories left untold. But all they found was silence there, as still as winter rain. No childhood song, no father's house, no glory and no pain. Then Hades sat with him alone through many lanterned hours, and spoke not as a king of shades, but softly among flowers that bloom beside the underworld where gentle spirits rest, and gave to him the name Moramir, and called the naming blessed. Oh, sing of the Lord of the underworld flame, who gave the lost and nameless name. And sing of Moramir, quiet and bright, who turned cold halls into hearth firelight, in the land where the lost and the fallen roam. Two hearts found more than a place called home. The days became like silver threads, the months like polished stone, and none could miss the tender way. They were no longer alone. Through gardens fed by ashen streams, through halls of dusk and gold, they walked as though the world had changed, or else their hearts had told. One evening by the Styx they stood, where dark waters move slow, and Hades, lord of countless dead, seemed struck by fear below. He spoke his love with open hands, then said, if you do not. But Moramir stepped close at once and answered him with thought. He did not answer first with words, nor let the silence grow. He kissed him there beside the stream where only shades may go, and all the dim eternal shore seemed warmer than before, as if the underworld itself had learned what love is for. So sing of Hades, solemn-hearted king, and of the boy who gave the dark realm spring. No memory came, no old life returned, yet brighter than the past, a new flame burned. And down where the silent rivers run, two souls became what fate had never undone. on slick black ground fell ragged. Close behind the gareth, pressed against the wall, red hair soaked dark with rain. And Valak stood beside him there, all silver, ash and pain. Then from the mouth of shadowed streets came Jean with hunting grace. No fury shouted from his lips, no mercy on his face. He drew the heavy bowstring back, the old familiar art, and fixed the arrow straight and true against young Gareth's heart. The bow was bent, the knight held breath, the rainbow witnessed close to death. But love stood where no shield should be, and changed what hatred came to see. The string gave song a sudden note, the kind that fate recalls. But Valak moved before the sound had fully crossed the walls. He hurled himself through pain and fear, between the shaft and mark, and caught the arrow in his flesh like lightning in the dark. It struck his shoulder with a thud that drove him back and low, and Gareth caught him as he fell beneath the rain's cold flow. They sank together to the stones, one pale with pain and strain, the other trembling like a man half drowned in shock and rain. Jean reached again into the quiver, swift and trained and cold. A second arrow found the string as all the tale seemed told. He raised the bow to finish what his hunter's lore had named. But what he saw before him then left every instinct changed. For Gareth did not look his way, nor curse, nor beg, nor flee. He clutched at Valak's blood-wet robes in raw agony. And Valak, white with pain and loss, still forced his shaking hand to rise and touch young Gareth's cheek. With care he'd barely stand. The bow was bent, the knight held breath, the rainbow witnessed close to death. But love stood where no shield should be, and changed what hatred came to see. Thumb moved soft across the skin, a gesture faint and slow, a small and stubborn tenderness the rain could never drown. His lips formed words no storm could steal, those sounds refused to stay. And in his eyes one promise burned, fear would not win that day. Jean stared as if the addy stones had shifted underfoot, for now he saw no hunted prey, no evil at the root. Only one soul taking the wound another should have known, and one heart breaking at the thought of facing night alone. The tension left his shoulders first, then slowly left his hand. The arrow lowered toward the ground, the string no longer strained. And in that rain-soaked dead-end lane where death had nearly fed, a hunter learned devotion's face and turned away instead. No oath was sworn, no grand peace made, no old world washed apart. But something sharp inside him dulled and opened in his heart. For stronger than the will to strike and deeper than old skill was love that knelt in blood and rain and made the bow go still. The bow unbent, the night breathed free, the rain ran silver down the street. And where death stood a breath before, it found a hand on one loved more.